Hello, welcome back to Odyssey, where a new era begins. I'm Tony Rodrigues, and today we have a great guest, and
Nikita.
Szymczak, both of you.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that, but I want to introduce Mark Szymczak.
Yep.
I hope I say it right. And Mark has SedonaQuantumConsciousness.org, and is somebody that has a master's in engineering undergrad.
Right, an engineering undergrad.
And then a master's in applied breathing sciences, and that's what we're going to get into. And I assume that a result of your work in that led you to a lot of the other things that you're doing.
Yeah.
That I want to mention before we get off the website, Sedona QC for Quantum Consciousness, and where you'll be planning retreats to expand on the stuff that you're teaching and doing.
Yep.
So welcome to the show. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Tony, Nikita.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Good
Happy
stuff.
to have you. Yeah, me sitting in this seat is due to you, actually, as of many things. But I just feel, it feels full circle to have you here, because we're just reflecting. Last year was the first time that I met you, and I was on a hike with our friend Ben, and looking at our backpack, and yeah, I'm like, Ben has the same last name as me? Whose backpack is this? And that's when I met you and realized, Szymczak may be more of a regular name in Poland, but
yeah.
not as much
Not
in
here,
the US.
right? How often do you run across a Szymczak?
Never.
Too often.
Not until now. And
It was meant to be.
it was meant to be. And
Yeah.
Sedona's a small town, so.
Yeah, it's cool.
So I also just wanted to speak on a little bit of just my experience in Sedona through you, because you are you're a thought leader. You're known well here as someone who just you radiate love, but I want to get into that because you're not so emotional. So we'll dive into it. Love as a feeling and as a state of being.
Sure.
But yeah, I remember my first time kind of meeting you was at Canyon Rose, which is such a beautiful space, but also at Ultimate Light Mission. So
Right.
a little bit of what you do is the Meditation Mondays. Do you want to talk a little bit on those?
Sure, yeah. We can start with the Meditation Mondays and what we were doing there, Wellness Wednesdays and Frequency Fridays, because at Sedona Quantum Consciousness, we're about helping people amplify their energy, vibration, and intentions. And so we do some, relatively, I call it serious spiritual work. Everyone has their own individual work to do, and we encourage that and show people how to build a practice. But at the same time, we do collective work, together, and then also in the quantum field at 9 o'clock. We'll talk about that later. But, on these Mondays and Wednesdays with Meditation Monday, where we do biocharge, we have a Tesla coil that you're quite familiar with here, and we kind of use it to bring us some health. It brings us some, a lot of energy, pulse magnetics, Tesla coil, and so it's putting out energy, but we then add our prayer and intentions to it and amplify. We're the real technology, and we amplify that out to the universe with a common intention. And so it makes it kind of fun because we're getting some healing depending on the recipe we choose, and then we're bouncing that out to the universe with that feeling on the heart. It depends. Some days we do a different kind of meditation, but often it's a meditation on the heart, amplifying gratitude, maybe joy, bliss, whatever feels right in here at the time to pump out to the universe, to bring that intention. And so we'll state an intention and we'll bring that into fruition. And it's kind of the work of Lynn McTaggart. This is nothing that I've made up. This has been around for some time, right? Is calling in intentions and recognizing this is powerful work that we can do in the quantum field, that we can do work in the 3D world here, but it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to also do a little bit of work in the quantum field, and it has a much more powerful effect. And so that's where I kind of like to go with, at least here in Sedona. Coming to Sedona was like, oh, this is where you need to start this practice, and it's been a lot of fun. We call it quantum joy here. You know that, right? Because we're not just about we're about yin and yang, both the meditation, the quiet, the prayer work, but then also we yang it up pretty good here, don't we?
Yeah. It sounds a lot like the merging of science versus spirituality. And so, so your undergrad in engineering and then to have your master's in the breath, can you speak a little more on your studies and what your mission is?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was fully in the matrix for most of my life and in allopathic care as an asthmatic kid and adult, not even young adult, even as an adult. And so, just following kind of the paradigm of, oh, let me get a degree, engineering degree, go into sales engineering. And so, I learned a lot of, project engineering, sales, these sorts of things, which good, to raise a family and to have some finances taken care of. And so, that was an aspect of my life. But then I recognized that, man, this breathing thing isn't going away. Here I am in my 40s and still, hacking up a lung and just not healthy, because I was in allopathic care and that just wasn't working. And I said, and I had figured out the gut that I need to get rid of some of the, things that I was eating. And that helped some, but still had a lot of exercise-induced asthma and other issues. And so when this opportunity came along to get a master's in applied breathing sciences, and I should back up a little bit because there's more of a story. I was heavy into neurofeedback and biofeedback at the time. I had been kind of a biohacker for some time and got into, because of family issues, got into neurofeedback, if you're familiar at all with that. It was just brainwave entrainment and helping the brainwaves correct themselves through sensors and feedback. And so I was like, I really want to get credentialed so that I can speak to a little, on a pedestal a little bit more about these things and learn. I wanted to learn and get credentialed so I can help people. And so this was a rare opportunity from a school to have a master's in applied breathing sciences. And it's where we use biofeedback tools, which is we look at a variety of aspects of the breath, the chemistry of breathing, which is, so we're looking at HRV, we're looking at respiration, we're looking at CO2 levels in order to bring about undue dysfunctional habits. So I went and became a practitioner after getting the degree. I kind of said, enough with the engineering aspect. This is more fun, helping people, right? And so so I worked for a pediatric cardiologists, and some other doctors when they would send me clients, kids, adults that had dysfunctional breathing issues, and I would help correct that. And so got into behavioral health. So the school itself was a cross-disciplinary subject on human behavior, on physiology, and on psychology. So it was really cool to learn aspects of human behavior when you're an engineer and you really don't know squat about people, and then move into this, like, oh man, this is so much more fun, right? And then to start looking at the paradigms and understand it from a chemistry standpoint, to really understand it, because there's a lot of people that know that think they know the breath. I mean, everybody and their brother.
All of us.
All of us, right? and I don't want to dissuade anyone from being an expert necessarily, but it's fun to watch. I kind of peel back and am amused at all the different experts in the world around different subject matter, right? And this is a fun one because I come from, I kind of know my shit in this area a little bit. And so but between the yoga teachers, your PE teachers, and spiritual people that are like talking about this breath, and it's just fun to kind of watch the different aspects of what people think. And so kind of understanding it deeper is nice, because it helped me cure my own asthma. So now some people here know I rock it when it comes to hitting the hills of Sedona, right? At my age, I rock it pretty well. And so, so I really feel as though I walk my walk and, feel authentic in what I talk about too. And it is one aspect of what's brought me into spirituality, but I even got into the spiritual aspect of myself even before the master's degree, so, yeah.
So I'm curious about a lot of things after that, unpacking that. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, who benefits the most from what you are teaching in breathing? Like, what kind of person comes to you and really benefits the most from it? Somebody that's sick from it, or are you teaching everybody to do this?
Yeah, it's good. That's a great question, Tony, because if we'll stick with the breath and put the spiritual aspect aside for a second and just kind of focus on
We'll get to that,
Right,
too.
we'll get to that. But the breath is, everyone. So I'm a peak performer. So while I was helping people with dysfunctional habits, at the same time, there's really this peak performance aspect of myself that I can help, athletes like peak, top athletes really get into the zone a little bit more, especially if they want more endurance. So I can help them understand how to build respiratory fitness. So that's part of what I teach. Is like many people, I was doing triathlons for a while. Once I hacked my life, I was like, oh, okay, let me go do the triathlons. And watching all the mouth breathers doing triathlons was kind of fun to, just see, because, you can really hit it a lot harder if you learn how to build respiratory fitness as opposed to cardio. Most people are just focused on the cardio or the muscles, and it's the one aspect of breathing that people don't understand, is that we can build respiratory fitness, which gives you more endurance. It gives you better brain waves. It gives you a lot more upstairs. It gives you better sleep. It gives you a health span. I guarantee people an extra 20 years to their life if they listen and take on the suggestions.
Okay,
that I
so
make.
that's not a small statement. That's a big statement to say we can extend your life by just learning how to breathe,
Right,
in
properly.
fact, correctly.
Yeah.
So, okay, I have so much, I feel like a bottleneck. What's the most common mistake people make?
Yeah.
Breathing, because we're all breathing.
Right.
Hopefully everybody watching is breathing.
Yes.
So,
Well, we talked about, one of the things we threw out there, for the show was the myths around breathing, right? And so if we can frame it like that and say, there's a lot of myths around breathing that people make mistakes on, and that can be corrected fairly, I won't say easily, because there's work. Anytime you're trying to develop a better habit, there's the movement from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, where you're aware that you're incompetent, then building conscious competence in the subject matter, then it becomes unconscious competence, and that's where we want to go.
The goal.
So if you're watching this show, you may at least go, oh, wow, maybe there's something I can learn. I was unconscious about my incompetence here on this. And so the mistakes are, one of the myths, the biggest, there's a few. And so can we go there?
sure, I mean, well, I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here being scrutinizing, like you guys, I'm sure you can't tell, but I'm like trying to work on my breathing all of a sudden because I never knew, right? So,
Because
but
I'm
I
going to
believe you.
judge, because I'm
No,
not.
yeah.
Like,
Well, and I believe you because there's certain, because I'm hiking in Sedona too, and it's not so easy.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm learning.
It's great. So, blessing is that we're here at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and that we can be on the hills going to 7,000 feet. It's a great, when the Olympians train, they train at altitude. So it's a great place to train better respiratory fitness, which puts you in a much better position when you're down at elevation to breathe well if you train at elevation. And so one of the myths, if we go there, is, I'll start with some of the simple ones, is like chest breathing versus belly breathing. It doesn't matter. And that there's, it doesn't matter how we breathe. And really, no, the diaphragm is best, right? And so we really, and as an asthmatic, I was chest breathing a lot, thinking that I needed more air. And so I was up here in sympathetic activation, breathing up. And that was kind of unconscious that I did that, because I was thinking as a kid I needed more air, and that's what happens when you're tight on air, is you're up here. And so if one was to put their one hand here and one hand here on the belly, it's like, where do you feel your hand moving as you breathe? And it should be down here in the belly, not up here in the chest. Yeah. And so what happens if we're in the chest is that really we're in more sympathetic activation, and we're not getting quite as full breaths. And so it's much, and the diaphragm has a whole other function for helping, peristalsis, which is movement, gut motility. So there's a lot more. So when we're breathing well, using the diaphragm, and again, that can just be, becoming aware of this, right? And then there's ways for it to become just natural. over time, right? And so that is one myth, is that, no, we want to be kind of breathing down here. And so building that habit of being more parasympathetic, and this is where meditation can come in, because naturally when we're, and this is why they kind of dovetail into each other, is that when we meditate, we're moving ourselves into a more parasympathetic state. It's one of the many thousands of benefits of meditation, is that we're bringing in the calm, the it's okay, life is all right, right? And once we get through the monkey mind and chatter up here, and so then we can more naturally breathe down here in our diaphragm. So it's one aspect of more naturally breathing down here, and it's another reason that a meditation habit is quite helpful to our being. And so that's one myth. The other myth that's prevalent and that I really want to get out to the world, because the wave the world is riding right now is, from my perspective, the lens of overbreathing, of Wim Hof, of hyperventilation, of holotropic breathing. And I don't want to fully denigrate it, because there may be a place for this aspect of having an experience through holotropic breathing, which is your breath work, right? Of doing an experience. But many people will leave that experience, right, of hyperventilation to take the prefrontal cortex offline and bring up the amygdala, other parts of the brain that have a heyday then. And so this is an experience that can happen, but many people will leave that or do that regularly and more naturally or consciously move into more hyperventilation on a regular basis. And so people have, over time, for any number of reasons, I've put thousands of people on my capnometry breathing equipment that looks at the chemistry of their breath and realize that, whoa, over-breathing is an epidemic. And it is problematic to a lot of things in our body that cause conditions, symptoms. And that's why I said we can roll back your clock 20 years if we get your breathing right, because of the chemistry and the breathing. So over-breathing comes naturally. Many people have formed this habit of over-breathing because they have traumas as children. They have traumas as adults. They're into a more sympathetic state. And so more naturally, we are in a fight or flight that has us breathing a lot more than necessary. Yeah. And so we need to pull that back, right? Because and some people go so far as to mouth breathe. Not just a little of the time, but all the time. So that's the other big myth, is that mouth breathing is okay, and it's not. Yeah.
I want to stop you, because I want to get into your equipment too, because I don't think of breath and chemistry together ever. Yeah. But I keep hearing you talk about, okay, the breath connected to the gut, to anxiety. Now we're talking about different traumas, and so for you, it was so relevant being asthmatic to dive deep into the breath. Can you speak a little bit more on how, the breath sounds like a key. What benefits as a whole for our lives if we focus on just the breath?
Yeah, well, first to pull back that, unpack it a little bit, we don't want to focus on just the breath. I mean, we can use the breath to help settle the nervous system a little bit, right? But we want to move to that unconscious, subconscious competence. So we want to move from this space of, okay, it's not quite right. Let's tweak it. Let's build the respiratory fitness so that it does become subconsciously competent, right? And then, so that could be doing the work of undoing traumas, right? So that we get more into our calm, right? It can be the work of meditation. So there's a lot of aspects. Or it can be the work of building physiologically respiratory fitness. So there's different ways to go about bringing in this new habit of health, which is the calmer state, which is a more natural breathing less. So we'll go back to breathing less. And so that's what I teach them. So we'll go from that breath work, which is over breathing and breathing more. Oh, I need more air, which is another myth, that I need more oxygen. No. People actually need, oxygen is oxidizing. They actually need less. Wow. They need more CO2 in their system. That's what's missing. That's what most people don't know. And that's the chemistry that we get to when we go on the capnometry equipment, is that, it's really about CO2 in your system that you need. Because CO2 is actually what releases oxygen to the muscles, tissues, organs that need it. If you don't have enough, there's something called Bohr's law, that your air is oxygen is coming in through your lungs, going through it's on the hemoglobin and red blood cells going to the place that need it. But if you don't have enough CO2 on the hemoglobin, it's a gatekeeper and it doesn't release the oxygen to where it needs to go. And so you have to have more CO2 on the hemoglobin in order for oxygen to get there efficiently to where it needs to be.
It's almost counterintuitive.
It's very counterintuitive. So that's why people go, I need to breathe more, I need more oxygen to my, no, actually, and that's why it's difficult, that you really, and when I put people on the equipment and show, your chemistry is low, and then we do some changes and how much better they feel once they start tweaking the habit. And this is why I teach people how to meditate properly or do a pranayama that's good for getting into the 0 point with their meditation.
Real quickly, do you
Sure.
recommend a longer breath, like a 5 in, 5 out in the beginning of a meditation?
Yeah, I don't like to give prescription breathing, algorithms to people, because someone who is just beginning this is going to be different than where I am with my respiratory fitness. Like, I'll do minute breaths, before 5 minutes of minute breaths, right? But someone who's not trained can't start there. They're going to start with maybe just a couple seconds in, 5 seconds out, and a pause at the bottom. To better answer your question, though, Tony, is that what do we want that breath shape to look like, right? And so what I'll train through the equipment for someone is to have them breathe in just naturally, not even count. Most importantly is that it's all nose breathing. Is that it's always nose breathing. So let me go right there, because the mouth is for eating, the nose is for breathing. It's really about that we want to get into a habit of never mouth breathing, even though the movies would have you think otherwise, because they're always trying to show people with their drama, and they're trying to get people to mouth breathe because they want people dying off early. We know that, so.
Well, I used to be a breath worker in the past, so I taught people how to breathe with their mouth open for those duration. And so I'm curious, because when I think about like the prolonged breath, I feel frustrated because I can't do it as much as I'd like to, as long as I would like to. And so it made me wonder what the tie is, because we talk about holotropic breath work is for trauma. Like, people do it so that they can release their trauma. Mm-hmm. You're saying that if we could deepen the breath and learn how to breathe, could we let go of our trauma in that way too? And would that let go of the frustration to get a deeper breath?
I don't have a clear answer for that, because you're asking, okay, if we learn to breathe properly through respiratory fitness and my ancestral health hacks, does it necessarily mean that we release traumas? And I would probably say no. So holotropic breath work or medicines, plant medicines, do have their place in helping to relieve ourselves, or doing, other practitioners that help relieve trauma. So there's that aspect which can be helpful for reducing that nervous system down. But couple that with the ancestral health habit of building better respiratory fitness, and then you're moving into peak performance.
Okay.
And so I'll dovetail back to Tony's question about, well, what would a good breath look like? Because it really, it should be quiet. That this, when I sit in meditation and hear people breathing, I'm like, not really. I'm not trying to judge, especially in meditation, right? A kid, but nonetheless, a good breath should be quiet, and it should be through the nose all the time. And then I started to say, okay, just a natural inhale. Not really a pause at the top, because at the top we're in more sympathetic. When we're up here, if we look at our heart rate and heart rate variability, our heart rate is up when we're at the top of our breath, and the heart rate goes down when we're down here. So we can actually add a little bit more to our life when we have less heartbeats. And so it's really, the pause should be down here at the bottom, not at the top. And now, we can meditate and do that, and that's a good practice to have, is like, because people that aren't used to that could just use meditation. Oh, let me just stay on this breath, and up, down, and then the pause. And if we want to build respiratory fitness as a pranayama before meditation, like the minute breath, that's not my natural breath, is to breathe once a minute, is to really extend that pause, or that exhale and that pause even longer, to where it hurts a little bit. It's like no pain, no gain, and where, oh, okay, I can go on a little bit longer. Oh, this is a near-death experience. That's cool. And then do it again. And so it's like each little breath can be your own little training. No, it doesn't have to be near death, but it could be. You'll come back alive. That's a bit extreme, but you could do extended breaths and just hold. I suggest to people holding 3, maybe 5 seconds longer than is comfortable, and see if you can do that for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So that's one way to start building respiratory fitness before meditation. And then you're so freaking tired by the time you get to meditation, you're dropping into that 0 point. So if you do it for 5 minutes, this pranayama, it's actually a good one. And that's why box breathing is good, because you've shrunk the airways. And that's why nose breathing is so much better than mouth breathing. Ask me about that question when you want to, and we'll get into the chemistry of why the nose is different than the mouth, because that's a biggie.
So when I was young, I got kicked in the face.
Okay.
Got my nose broken.
Yeah.
And so the doctors, they said, "Are you going to be a long-distance runner?" And I was like, "What are you talking about, doc? I'm bleeding on the table." And they said, "Don't worry about it." So my airway is a little constricted.
Yep.
Is that something that, because I'm curious, sorry about you guys, I'm asking my own question.
No, a lot of people have that question, so it's a very valid, wonderful question, because a lot of my friends are like, hey, look, I have, this sinus congestion, I have a deviated septum, right, where I just can't breathe through my nose very well. And I'm here to say that you can retrain. It's going to take some grit and some work to do, but much of this does, right? But you can open up that airway and start breathing. And a doctor, they don't know this stuff. They just don't know. But that you can train that. I've had people that train the breathing through the nose and the airways open up. I had that problem myself, meaning I was sinus congested as a kid all the time. So that's part of why I probably became my whole family was a family of mouth breathers. My dad had a heart attack by the time he was my age, because he was a mouth breather. He was running marathons.
Because he was a mouth breather.
So the mouth breathing is actually
I gotta know.
detrimental.
Yeah, the mouth breathing. So what happens, here's how it can happen, and this is why it's good. And we'll get you on my equipment, Tony. We got to get you.
I'm sitting here with my jaw open. So
Right, because if left, to its own devices, and if we stay a mouth breather, and my father hey Dad, sorry about this, but it is what it is. And so a lot of people exercise a lot, and that's why marathon runners don't really end up living that long, because a lot of them don't know that, I shouldn't be training with mouth breathing. They just think, more air to get lactic acid build up, and and get the lactic acid and the CO2 out so that they can get more air. But what happens? So back to your question, right? Your question was about the deviated septum.
And is that how big of an influence?
Yeah, and so what we can, so if we train that, and so I say, that's a good thing. So we have to spin it and frame it as a positive, like, hey, that means less air, so I get to practice better building up more CO2 in my system. You can cheat and say, well, I can be a mouth breather. You just have to be a 2 marshmallows tomorrow person and go, I'd rather live 20 extra years and have the grit now of not mouth breathing and just developing this fitness of breathing through my nose, and it will eventually open up. And it opens up. And even if you're sinus congested at night, if you hold your breath, like this used to happen to me, or asthma, you hold that breath and that the body knows to open up. The body knows that, we better get that other orifice open so that we can get air in here. So the body learns how to open up airways if we're sinus congested. And over time, your sinus passageway will open up if you do the work of just more nose breathing. And at night, I highly encourage people to put mouth tape over there, a little bit of tape. There's some 3M mouth tape you can get from Amazon. Not a big piece, just a tiny piece. And use it 15 minutes before you go to bed, just to let your nervous system know that it's going to be okay, that I can do this, right? And so just get used to that, so that at night, because what will happen is that we mouth breathe at night, and this is what happened to my father, is that, okay, it was mouth breathing through the day, then mouth breathing at night, and his chemistry was way off. It shifts your pH in your body. It shifts a whole lot of other systems in the body when you're not breathing through your nose. And so, and when you're getting too much oxygen and not enough CO2. And so that's why the mouth tape will at least help you for those 6 to 8 hours, breathe through your nose at night. It's invaluable.
It's mind-blowing to think about the CO2 levels and how that's actually beneficial.
Yeah.
To have less oxygen.
Yeah.
Like the challenge has always been more oxygen for me.
Right. And it's not, as a asthmatic too, I was like, we think that we need more. And it was really CO2, as it turns out, is a bronchodilator. So it opens up the airways. It's a vasodilator. It opens up the arterial system. So those people that have Raynaud's, cold hands and feet, that's a function of their breath. It's because they're not getting good, dilation of the end cortical, the corpuscles here in the hands. And so when we breathe through our nose and have more CO2, it opens up those blood vessels a lot more.
And like I was saying earlier, I mean, at my age, I consider myself a good breather. Like I made it, like we're all breathing. It's something you don't think about. And to actually to assign a correct or an incorrect way to it is totally mind-blowing to me right now.
It's a different paradigm, right? It's a new lens that I'm grateful to be able to share.
It's beautiful because it pertains to every single living person. So this isn't something we're just talking about. And how childhood trauma comes into play, because a lot of us work with that too. Is amazing that's something that changes your breathing in your hands. I'm having a dominoes fall in my head thinking about the ramifications.
Imagine just being, delivered cesarean section or being pulled out by forceps. I mean, it happens. These traumas happen to kids. Your parents are fighting while you're in the womb. Your nervous system. I tell my daughter, hey, protect those eggs. You need to have a calm, cool, collected life. If you have your eggs already in you, and if you're a nervous wreck, you're already setting off the nervous system here. Mm-hmm. That's why traumas builds into families, because you're starting really young. And so, this is where compassion is in order, because it's not your fault if you've moved, if you're in this direction. Again, me with my asthma, the allopathic world, right? This is just how life unfolds for most of us until we know something otherwise and go, oh, we can stop this.
That's an extremely advanced state of mind.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier of looking at your injury in a positive aspect, because now you can shift it. I'm more, I want to dive into more of the spiritual aspect of it for you with your asthma. Did that have something to do with your spiritual awakening, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it does, right? That, the hero's journey, I look back and it wasn't the plan, but we figure it out. Me a little bit late. I was in my mid to late 40s before I hacked the full asthma thing and go, oh, okay. And so it did, the spiritual aspect of me though came about because of family dynamics. I was like, I gotta hack this.
Would you dive in a little bit?
Do you want me to?
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Sure, yeah. Because, we all have wonderful families that help us grow, right? And so, I had a family that the psychologist said, I went to him because I was having a little difficulty with my son at a young age, and they wanted to put him on medication, and my wife was okay with that, and I was like, wait a second, this just doesn't feel right, and the psychologist, and I went to him and says, I need to be more like Gandhi or Mother Teresa. I didn't even know the word meditation at that point. I didn't even know. And he's like, why? I was like, this family, it's really a challenge, and I need to be more grounded. I didn't have my emotional intelligence and control that I do now. And so this is probably upwards of close to 20 years ago, 17 years ago. And he's like, you need Adyashanti. And so Adyashanti was a spiritual guy on the West Coast doing, retreats and what have you. So I went to one of those. It's like, oh, okay, this is cool. And the quantum field, as it would have it, shortly thereafter, a friend who was Indian and I was living in the Bay Area was playing tennis, and we somehow got on the topic of meditation. He was like, hey, Mark, do you want to come to our meditation? I was like, sure. And he's like, yeah, we do trainings every, once a month. I was like, that sounds interesting. Before you know it, it's me and 100 Indians meditating, one Caucasian, 100 Indians in Little India, Fremont, California. And it's a wonderful, it was a huge opening for me to be invited, let alone, stick it out for the better part of 15 years with a very advanced spiritual group, they were originated in Hyderabad, India. It's called Sri Ramchandra Consciousness. And so I embarked in order to grow myself, to be capable of handling my family, keeping it all together myself. So for 15 years, it was 2 to 3 hours a day of meditation. It was a spiritual practice that was really cross-training of prayer, meditation, cleaning. It was a real true PhD type of program that got me, into an aspect of who I am and what I would become. And I'm extremely benefited by having done that for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
We giggled about it in the beginning. I was like, you're not that emotional. And so I would love for you to speak on, because there's a lot of, we talk about it, like, where are the men? And you calling in the men to heal and to be able to show up for themselves and in return for the collective consciousness. So what are some of the emotions that you faced when you were in the trials that maybe people could relate to?
When I was younger, those emotions. So yeah, that's a great question that helps. Let's look at it this way. Many of you, or the audience, might be familiar with Hawkins' level of consciousness, right? Muscle testing from apathy, shame, the lower emotions and feelings of guilt, right, that are really down there close to suicidal sometimes, shame, apathy, guilt, right? If we're in those emotions, then there's fear, desire, and then we start moving into neutrality, courage, acceptance, right? These higher emotional states or feeling states to maybe peace or reason. There's reason in there and logic. Then there's courage, neutrality, acceptance, compassion, peace, and enlightenment, right? So we can move, and joy is in there as well. And so we can move through these. So it's not a matter of not being emotional. It's a matter of emotional intelligence and moving our vibration to where do we want our emotions to be on that, if it was linear. And he puts it linear, but we know it's not always linear. But where would we like our vibration rate to be? Where would we like to have? And so I taught my daughter's AP class, and I asked them about all their emotions, and we put them all on the board and then put them in a category of kind of good or bad. It's like, well, where would you rather be? Over here on this side with your emotions, or here? And of course, all the kids chose here. They want to be feeling good most of the time. We can actually move our emotions that way, right? What if you could choose your emotions? And so that's where I think I do have feelings and emotions, but they're just, I like to say that they're up here. That I can look at this world here that happens with more amusement, right? With it is, and some compassion, right? And empathy, but not necessarily get stuck. Because as Ben knows and a few others, I value productivity. And that I really value productivity. We're in a spiritual war here, and I value those that don't want to get bogged down with the drama of life, because we can be much more productive people if we get stuff done and we move toward our higher self and our higher competencies and put some of these lower emotions aside. And it's not that, there's work involved with getting these put aside. Don't get me wrong, there's compassion, there's work, but the goal is to inspire yourself, others, and those in your family to move into this higher states of being so that you can get shit done. And so that's the lens that I work out of. Let's get it done.
Yeah, the key word I heard was amusement, because I know for me, like, I still experience like the physiology of my emotions. Sometimes feel like I have the awareness, the competent But
yeah,
like
but
I have
the
the awareness.
amusement,
I have the awareness of it, but I don't always feel like I can just shift it right there. But being able to look at it from an amusement state where it's like, this is really amusing what's going on and these sensations in my body, and then to shift to productivity.
It's a great way to a lens to look through and to start. Eventually, you want to move into that subconscious competence where they don't even happen, but to have that two-step, and that's the beauty of meditation. It allows you that pause to step back and go, oh, wait, and to downplay. This is the beauty of meditation, is that, to drop the ego, drop the thoughts, drop that, move back into the now, so that little by little we desensitize ourselves to this thing that wants to be a victim or wants to feel that way, these lower emotional states. And so that's why I encourage people to build this practice more than just 15 minutes per day. It's worth it to do it in the morning when you're attentive and you can say no to the barking dog up here. You can say no to that thought. And that allows more pause. And that allows us to have this more witnessing, amusement state of being that allows us to then drop off drama or to be more discerning about what needs attention so that we can direct our energy more correctly or choose the right, we have free will here, so choose the right pathway a little bit more cleanly so that we're doing things that are toward our higher productive capacities and competencies. Your turn, Tony.
So hold on. So firstly, I've been trying to breathe more shallow and hold it out, and I'm getting sleepy. So I'm working on it, man. I'm putting it right this minute. The meditation is something. So I teach remote viewing.
Yeah.
Course I do, and it's the same thing. We call it confetti. The confetti thoughts that pop up.
Yes.
So that's the biggest trick in remote viewing. And when you talk about the way the frequency at which you're doing it, you're achieving that where you're not really thinking or not letting that monkey mind run wild, and then being a little bit stoic, keeping your emotions in control. Believe me, I never got my life in any kind of order until I got my emotions in control.
Yeah, it's a biggie.
I imagine that was a big spiritual awakening for you. Everybody's spiritual, I think, from the cradle to the grave, whether they realize it or not.
Good point.
Same way we're breathing. But I mean, like putting that together and having the monkey mind quiet down really means that you're listening to the universe. Like the information comes in that direction. When we talk about remote viewing, we're looking for hard data of a predetermined target. So we know that the data comes to us right at that moment when the mind is quiet. And there's a bunch of science around it. We could talk later.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, right? That quiet mind allows for you empty out the ego and it allows for divinity in its various ways to drop in.
Well, and then charge collapse is the same way the Tesla coil works as well. So I always say that at the Planck distance, when you get an electron or a thought wave to go exactly to the Planck distance, it's a ping pong ball in a cup across the room.
Right.
And so you throw a bunch of ping pong ball, and when you're thinking crazy, it's rapid fire. When you create a field like with the biocharger, there's billions and billions of ping pong balls randomly going into the cup, and that's your real connection to outside of time space, where all the goods are. That's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens.
So what I'm saying, you're doing it in a completely different route than what led me there.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, when was your first big whammy where you went, oh man, I touched something here?
It happened probably when it wasn't me touching, it was someone else grabbing me. I was probably in Hyderabad where the Grand Poobah, we'll call him, the master at the head, during meditation, all of a sudden I'm choking during meditation in India. I'm like, what is going on here, right? And like, well, I can't. And at the end of meditation, he's like, did you feel that? I was like, yeah, I did. And so that was like, oh, wow, there's capacities here that I have no clue about, right? I mean, through this, it was called Pranahuti aided meditation too, where we would sit one-to-one with a trainer and he would do some karmic cleaning of my system and you would feel energy flowing. So that's a way, there wasn't, the ahas were subtle. They weren't like, a big pow for me. They were subtle and gradual and knew that this was working, this was doing. And would say a lot of that, I owe a lot of the cleaning that happened to me to some of that other work. Like, I can only do so much cleaning on ourselves, but when you have someone that's a professional doing that, that was very helpful. So it wasn't one big aha other than, just that inner knowing that, oh, this is the right thing to do, to turn toward the quantum field, God, divinity, and to build that aspect of our spiritual self, which you've done through remote viewing, which is beautiful, or probably other ways too.
What I'm finding is the more and more that I research it, the more I get into it, it's the same exact science for a lot of everything across the board. Yeah. And it's straight curiously missing from our curriculum.
Right.
So that's the big, and we live in a world with a lot of things that are being hidden from us. When we talk about all of these other things, there's ghosts and extraterrestrials and secret ray guns that the government has. The way you can see them is by seeing the void of where the information stops, and there should be something there, and there's not. So what we have in consciousness technology is along the same way. We see a void in the medical field about consciousness itself. And so it begs the question, because you bring up, we don't get trained, there's no studies of this, and so we really do, it is part of, Nikita knows that, part of what I do is help support passion projects in the area, and we do look to develop new school systems for people that want to put their kids into the Jedi warrior training program sort of thing that develops these competencies in other areas, or just this awareness in other areas, right? These seeing without seeing. There's all sorts of capacities then. I'm an old dog, so it's a little tougher to teach me, although I work on it. But boy, these young ones, the ability to bend spoons, the ability to see without seeing, right? These aspects of this human, they don't want us knowing what we really can be. And that's where we need to go and start training our young ones. And so I've always said that the elite people that are running the world did everything they could to make themselves smarter and have more ability, and they ran dry. And so now they're left with making everybody else dumber. And so that's kind of with the trend we're seeing. There's definitely been a trend in the last 20 to 30 years of the average IQ of the United States going down. Thinking about oxygen levels, wouldn't more oxygen translate to more physical ability?
I'm glad you asked that. More oxygen to the places that need it could be helpful, but only if necessary. Like we're sitting here, right? We don't need a whole lot of air and oxygen for us to perform. That's oxidizing. If we overdo it, it's oxidizing to our system.
Pause. So it actually damages your cells on a level, having too much oxygen that's not being burnt off.
Yeah, it is not helpful because it sits in the circulatory system too. Because if you don't have enough CO2 sitting, on the hemoglobin, it's not being delivered, and you're messing with the pH. So the real big thing that's going on here when you have overbreathe, so let me go back to the mouth breathing. Why is that overbreathing? Well, because you can get rid of a lot. When we mouth breathe, we get rid of a lot of CO2. Our pH in the body, and this is the pH of the hemoglobin, the pH of the waters, the lymphatic system, the cerebrospinal fluid. We have all these fluids in the body that have to have a pH very close to 7.4. And if they're not, then the body has this bicarbonate buffer system to help bring it in line. But the pH is directly, it's called Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, is directly a function of your bicarbonate buffers over CO2. Well, what is CO2? CO2 is the way we breathe. If we overbreathe, we're giving off all that CO2. So the denominator goes down, which means the pH goes up, which means we're in respiratory alkalosis, and our pH is and so it starts messing with the chemistry of the body. That's why it's a big deal, because while we have some buffer systems to help us out, eventually if we're over breathing all the time, we run up against the buffer systems and it's not working so well. And that's why we need to breathe through our nose. The nose is a lot smaller airway system and it's a lot longer breath cycle. So it brings us into parasympathetic, but because it's a longer breath cycle, and it also doesn't allow us to give off as much CO2. So that's why nose breathing can be so important, because then the chemistry in the body is much better, and so that's, and here talking, I find myself getting a little more stuff, and I'm doing a lot of talking, singing. We tended, there was a ultra marathon runner friend that said, Mark, I can run, 50 miles in the morning, but, after work, I can barely run 5. And I'm like, well, Hashi, what are you doing all day? He's like, well, I'm in meetings. So I was like, okay, what are you doing in the meetings? He's like, well, we're talking. I was like, who's doing the talking? He's like, well, I'm the manager. I do most of the talking. I'm like, let's get you on the equipment. His chemistry was so low at the end of the day that, so again, your performance goes down,
Yeah, my jaw dropped thinking about that.
Well, you gotta close it and breathe through your nose.
I know. I'm playing back to last week, and times that I had long days of talking, you're just exhausted.
Exhausted. Yep.
And
Yep.
I always thought it was just from a mental exhaustion, of like staying sharp. But now you're telling me that there's actually a chemical way.
It sounds like there's a correlation of that, like mental chatter and the breath, being able to be in parasympathetic and.
There is. In fact, that opens up another, if we want to go there, because Tony, you were talking about brain waves. We have alpha, theta, beta brain waves and delta brain waves, and that when we overbreathe, we tend to be, more in beta brain waves, like a hypervigilant state, right? We're more sympathetic, right? And in this beta, low beta is okay. That's the 12 to 15 hertz range is fine. And of course, our brain is putting out different brain waves all the time, but predominant, we want to have, more alpha brain waves. So we want to be able, I call it behavioral flexibility. And that's probably one of the big aspects of things that we can learn as humans is behavioral flexibility. But even in the brainwave state, we want to have this ability to come back to a default, which is alpha coherent brainwaves. And that is like an open focus. And so we can talk maybe another time on how to develop more of these alpha coherent brainwaves and what that does for us, for sleep, for being, for health, for performance, right? Because this is an aspect, but the breathing and getting into respiratory fitness and bringing in the parasympathetic helps also bring in these more alpha brainwaves.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're actually shooting for an alpha state while you're meditating then?
Yeah, an alpha to alpha theta state, right? Yeah. So the real deep state, so alpha states are good, you can be hiking in an alpha coherent, higher alpha coherent state. But in your peak, your good meditators tend to have high peak alpha. But when you're doing meditation, you want to be able to drop into those more sublime, subtle, quiescent states, and that's more of an alpha theta, And the deep meditators, the guys that are really good, can even drop it into delta, and that's why they don't need sleep, because they're getting the deep N3 sleep while still being in a meditative state, and that's really advanced stuff.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I'm not there.
Well, I'm curious too. We talked about the energy of deception, like with our school systems and our training, and I know for me, like I have overtrained my body a lot with CrossFit and just these different training styles, where now I feel like tired. And so I would love for you to speak a little bit on maybe the ways that we can simplify training our bodies, because it's beautiful to be in meditation, and we also want to experience some level of healthy stress and training.
Yeah, the hormetic stress. So that's a term your audience may or may not know, but also limited, minimal, dosage for effective dosage, right? So, some people like to train all the time, but then you know, and it depends on what kind of training. Like if you're a marathon, or, you know, we have friends that, you know, are hiking all the time, doing some heavy work, right? And you know, I even have a son who's in the military that likes to train because it helps the mental balance. But there's a trade-off here, right? Because we can use up, I was fortunate I didn't use up my body as a kid. Now I'm in the best, at nearly, I'm not quite 60, but, you know, in the best condition of my life. Really, for the most part. And because I didn't use up my body so much, it's a lens when I was a kid. And so I didn't, you know, break bones, do these other things. So it's kind of a saving grace that, oh, here I am now able to use the body. So, but if a lot of people will train just to keep their emotions in check, right? To sleep better. And so there's value there, but there's overtraining. How much do we really want to get that, you know, because there's a lot in life to do. Right, from learning to sleeping to creating, right? There's all these aspects of life. So how do we balance that out so that we get an effective dosage that works for us? And there's different kinds of training, right? So there's yoga, which is a hormetic stress again, which puts stress on the body, limited time, but then the body comes back into parasympathetic afterwards. Respiratory fitness, like I train, you know, up a hill 3 times, a third of a mile. I just do 1 mile, but I do it 3 times, and I'm running up a hill, you know, 3 times, and that's minimum effective dosage, just gassed at the top of the hill. I'm, you know, building my respiratory fitness. Doesn't take me but 20 minutes to do this. So that's, you know, then the strength training. Do I really have to work out for an hour a day when I can do it, you know, in half an hour, right? So these hormetic stresses that put, cold plunging, right, is another hormetic stress. Sauna is another hormetic stress. How often, because there's a lot of them to do to make the body healthy, you know, and at what length do we have to go with each of them? So figuring that one out is, you know, again, fasting is another hormetic stress.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging to give a specific protocol because everyone is so different, but it's like, especially if you can think of just like an avatar of a human who maybe they've been mouth breathing for a long time, they haven't been meditating, like the average human who is under a lot of stress and a lot of cortisol, what would you recommend for them to begin doing? Is it healthy for them to just go straight into, you know, sprints every day, or?
You know, it's a beautiful question because someone who's stressed is not usually able to meditate that well, right? They get disenfranchised by that process. And so I don't necessarily start them there. I might start them with open focus, which is a form of meditation while hiking. So if they, you know, have their physiology isn't all that great, the respiratory fitness, you know, they've been in the corporate job for a long time and they are like, oh, waking up to this bigger possibility. Okay, I need to hack this. I need to hack my whole mind, body, and spirit. I have not done that, you know. Then we need to start building in habits that, you know, are gradual for those, you know, that so that we can stay with it, right? And so giving them something that they can move towards. So just going out for walks may be appropriate, you know, just practicing the nose breathing while on a walk can be for some. I had a client last year that was like very difficult to even nose breathe here in Sedona at 4,500 feet. Okay, we're just gonna go walk and practice our nose breathing. So give yourself a pat on the back. I used to be a wellness director too, I didn't mention that, but so I give a lot of presentations and one of them was on habit, you know, building better habits. And so just gradual, give yourself some attaboys for doing it every day. Start building in the habit, or attagals for building in the better habit of just going for that walk and then having the grit to make it hurt a little bit, right? And then I might add, okay, while on the hike or on a walk, let me open my focus a little bit and not be, most people in the corporate space are narrow focused on their computers all day or on the phone all day. They're in this beta brainwave, which is narrow focus. Our ancestors were out here in nature, in open focus. And so it's better to just, hey, be in nature, open up our focus, look out your peripherals, and that's bringing in more coherent alpha brainwaves. Dr. Les Femi figured this out. He was one of the original neurofeedback practitioners. And so there's a book called Open Focus to help you learn that a little more. Dr. Joe Dispenza, with all his, now you are, feel the volume in your lips, right? That is an open focus. So he's having people do open focus that came from Dr. Les Femi. So you can do this in your everyday. You can do it while driving, but be careful, don't get sleepy doing it. But you can just be here as opposed to here in your own thought process. So we can have a walking or a being meditation, bringing us back to that alpha brainwave.
Question and a point that I always make with people talking about meditation is the length of it. So I found that in a remote viewing session, it's better to have short pulses where you get into that state, get the data, and then come back up and make sense of it, and then what data you need and go back into that state. So short pulsed meditations, the no mind meditation. What do you recommend as far as length of a meditation?
I love that. That's a new lens for me that I want to try. I want to take your course, Tony.
I call it the stoplight meditation. So
Yeah.
people in the course that they say, man, I don't have time. It's a busy week for me. I'm not going to do the sessions, the targets this week.
Right.
And I say, well, meditate when you're at the stoplight.
Yeah.
So when it turns red, you sit there and shut it off. Nothing. No. If it's hot, if there's heat coming in the window, say that's not my heat. It's coming to me. I am in here, and nothing. And don't even think words to yourself. Shut it all off. Light turns green, and get back to driving. And then that muscle, that actual, it's a muscle.
It's a muscle. Yep. Of attention.
And that in a real remote viewing session with the peripherals, with the proper pre-meditation, with the pre-game, that ability to get into the data and go, oh, I think I saw a big building. Let's go look at it, and bam, back into that state of mind, probing. Is the muscle. I mean, that's really the difference. What sets people apart in terms of quality of data. And so listening to you with all these things, it takes a while to get into an alpha state.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's beautiful because you can practice, right? Any time that you have time, like even this alpha coherent, this open focus is kind of that without the eyes necessarily closed. But you can practice your attention, right? And so then when we, of course, meditation, again, if you're going to embark on meditation, we don't want you to get disenfranchised. So I encourage people, hey, just start with the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes, move to, I'm at an hour and a half. Of course, time of day matters, and that's a whole different maybe talk about best practices for meditation, right? And again, that could be a function of where someone is with their habits and their desire and where they want to go for that matter, because some people want to go for that enlightenment in this lifetime. Other people want to just, I want to be a better performer. I want to be a better mother, right? But that's the important part is what is driving into, what is it I want to, I value, right? Or driving into your kids. If you start with your kids' values, what is it that they value, and now, okay, how do I help them get there? How does this meditation, because meditation helps a lot of things. And if we put like, that's what I want to be a better tennis player, or I want to be a better mom, I want to be a better father, right? I better start now, because this is not overnight. These practices of building this competency of emotional intelligence and attention.
That's a real muscle. You don't think about it, but the mind, controlling the mind and your emotions is like a muscle. It's just like doing sit-ups or push-ups or anything else. You get better at it the more you do.
Yeah. Respiratory fitness, the mind, all these new things people don't really think about. They just
breathing
think muscles.
that I thought I had aced.
Well, I keep hearing the common denominator of purpose, like value and purpose. And so I would love to just hear a little bit more about like your specific, what do you feel like your purpose is, Mark?
Well, yeah, let's talk about purpose, because that's great, because people, we're reading books about soul purpose. So what is your incarnation purpose, here? And I've kind of, a lens on this that's a little different, and it's more about that we have different chapters in our life. The chapter in my 20s was much different than where I am now. And I had no intention of moving into this purpose that I happen to be in right now, right? This is the trust frequency of just allowing of trusting the pivots that need to happen and going this, and the discernment through muscle testing, or some people have downloads of, this is the right choice of free will to move into this potential of greater purpose. And so to go, this is what I'm going to be an astronaut, right? Now, that's one way to go about it, and then to work toward that. And I fulfilled my, I became an astronaut, now what? As opposed to the journey being along the way and becoming potentially much better and being surprised at what unfolds. And so I encourage people, well, not everyone, because different, to align with divinity and to serve, to empty that chalice of the ego, to get into this space where I want to serve, and to, and that prayer will be answered, right? To get into the space. And right now I happen to be serving in a variety of directions. And so that may change, and it probably will change by next year. But, some happen to be helping with finances and passion projects. Some happen to be, helping people more into prayer and meditation. Some happen to be helping people build ancestral health habits. So these retreat centers that help people get off of their dime, off of the couch, and into an aspect of building their higher potential. So a few purposes. Fortunately, I have a good team around me that helps with these things.
Yeah. I mean, when I hear you talk about it in that way, it's like one way to know if you're on purpose is if you are magnifying that in other people's lives, because you talked about like getting out of your own way to the trust frequency, letting divinity flow through you. And I came to you last October and was like, I don't have a purpose and I'm not consistent and I don't know what to do. And so I started with the universal prayers every night at 9, and that's like kind of what kicked off. Then I was in Purpose Lab and seeking, and so it's really interesting because I've been in these containers where I've like the whole purpose is to seek our purpose, and every single time we have found that it's like, because in Purpose Lab we did a few exercises where you like the gene keys or you use some tool to see who you are. And those were like the least frequency days when we were like seeking who we were. But then when we had these days where we were getting out of our own way and getting in these states where we were doing like the question and response journaling and speaking to God, speaking to Creator, and asking these questions and letting them flow through, that's when we left like so charged with our purpose. And so, it sounds like to me right now this chapter of your life is about letting the divine work through you and just being in the trust frequency, and then letting that be your service, like playing in the mystic a little bit.
It's more fun, right? Because we don't have stress as much if we say, I need to get there, I want to get there, this is what, in order for me to have my identity be fulfilled, or I want this, it's a strong desire. If we attach to it, and it's called, if we have an attachment to that, then there's stress when it doesn't go as expected or planned. Whereas if we're like, we're more in flow, and that's what we talk about, flow states that allow us to move into different spaces and fill gaps and serve at another level and be fulfilled, authentically fulfilled. And maybe it doesn't mean having the same credential, but it's fulfilling, and it can still move you into that higher potential. So it's good that and it's lovely that you took on 9 o'clock prayer to help others get into 9 o'clock prayer, because that prayerful state is a great place to begin because it's serving at a higher level.
I want to ask a loaded question. I want to take the deck of cards and shoot them on the floor. And when we talk about spirituality, where do you lie on that? What, are you using a Christian modality, a Buddhist modality? You've been to India and learned many Hindu things. Like, where? Yeah, I mean, and I'll preface this because you feel like you're on the spot.
Right.
And with this, everybody is. If you ask somebody, it's like politics. They're saying, "Did you vote for?"
Yeah.
Right. So it's a dangerous thing. I'll preface it with this: but I feel I read when I was young. I read every bit of religious text I could get from 19 until like 23.
Beautiful.
I read it all. I read the dark stuff too. Like I was really on a search.
Yeah.
And I was looking. I noticed the common denominators. They all only have only a couple things in common: is to be truthful. That's the big
Yeah.
flex. But I realize that I believe in a creator of the universe, a consciousness that ultimately created us, and we are fragments of. And I really like a lot of things. But what is your take on that?
Yeah, I'm certainly not attached to the onion, of what came through in India and some of the aspects of that. I'm not nearly as studied as yourself. What resonated, and I grew up Catholic, and obviously he was like, "Ooh, that's not it," No offense to any Catholics or my parents out there.
But there's a little to
Right,
be desired.
Right, that whole Vatican thing, right? You're like, oh, and then understanding as kind of an engineer, the quantum field and understanding that aspect, I'm like, oh, okay. And so this trust frequency, I met the authors not even a year ago at a conference, and Andrew and Connie, and this book, and it's probably why I went to the conference, the book is called The Trust Frequency, and it helped me put a lens, a perspective lens on how to go about this life and move into a trust frequency where we are serving at another level. And so it gave me, so it didn't bubble up. I read it, I'll just be honest, and go, wow, this is really good. So this trust frequency is about, and maybe we can talk another time on it rather than dive into it here, but it's a great book on 10 assumptions for building the better you and having a lens that helps that higher potential within us to unfold. And so one of the premises is that the first premise, in fact, is that we live in a loving, conscious universe. That this is not like, and so it doesn't frame it as God, but I'm all for God, however we want to frame it, God, divinity, conscious, that it is, and that it loves us, and it loves us unconditionally, and is here to help us unfold if we make the right requests and right decisions. And so there's a lot there that we'll talk about maybe another time.
It's a scary question to ask, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
So that's it's really interesting, and we talked about it before the show, was actually coming back and unpacking the trust frequency.
The trust frequency.
Specifically.
It helps us move into flow states.
The more I do research, or the more guests we have on, and we learn from, and the more things I realize that science and spirituality are really purposely driven apart when they are the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, there's a hole in our curriculum that seems to be on purpose, that is keeping our attention away from the fact that spirituality and quantum science, consciousness, and all of it is the same thing, based on the same thing.
A big part of what we should be learning and teaching our kids.
That's right. And then that the ancients knew.
Yes,
that they knew 1,000 years ago. We're just rediscovering things over and over again.
Beautiful.
Well, we can open it up for questions. I know there looks like there might be one or two here, but I wanted to ask you, for anyone who feels out of purpose right now or really disconnected from themselves, what's one simple, effective way that they can start to guide themselves back?
Yeah, well, building, if they're out of purpose, or is this question coming from like if someone is feeling anxious or has certain feelings?
I think I speak for a lot of people when I say the last few months have been rocky, energetically. A lot of people have their lives really shaken recently. So out of purpose, I think, is more common this year than last.
So maybe that would feelings of anxiety, feeling of disconnection, of being lost.
I come from this ancestral health perspective and go there first. So a lot of the people that we speak to, since we're here in Sedona, are people that have a spiritual bent. But many don't understand how important or how helpful it is to have. We are humans, and we are meant to be on this earth and walking and running and doing really physical things. And so, in fact, it was one of the headmaster trainers at my spiritual who was like, he just liked to stay in his house and meditate, but he was going to be gone, his body wasn't going to last that long. And so, if he just continued to do that these meat suits are meant to be used. And so a lot of anxiety, so my son who had heavy anxiety, he hacked it through the physical fitness. And it may depend on the body type too. But that's one aspect of getting out and moving in the morning, getting these ancestral health habits so that you get better sleep. Because a lot is getting good sleep. And so you have to hack your habits, like getting the sunshine. They say getting on the earth. Yes, some of that is helpful, but getting the sunshine in the morning, going for a light run, walk, building that respiratory fitness, just get the movement in. And that is going to really help, because that can be done. Everyone, unless you're in a wheelchair, and even in a wheelchair, you can start to have some physical fitness. And that really helps the emotional states. And that will help bring in, better sleep, which then just starts to help all those habits. When you start getting better sleep, the mouth tape is good to ensure that you are getting better sleep, so that your brain gets cleaned at night, and so that you're getting the right CO2 levels, and you're not mouth breathing, the pH. So all these things that can, if you're mouth breathing at night, eventually that'll lead to atrial fib and cardiac issues. So these are things that could be disruptive to feeling good on the inside. And so I start with the physical health, and maybe it's a lens.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's
Any
got me
last
soul
questions?
searching. I'm soul searching completely.
Yeah.
So rethinking the way. Anybody here got any questions? Nothing there? So there's one last order of business,
Sure.
and that is for you to sign the O.
Oh, yeah.
So right there on that table, we've got a little marker.
All right.
And if you want to get up and just pick a spot and give it a signature.
That looks, is that Morgan? No, that can't be. It's got to be a different Morgan. Okay.
We're going to have to get a table for this thing.
Nice.
Okay. Thank you,
Awesome.
guys.
Woo-hoo! Thank you.
Yes, feeling good about it. Thanks for the
All
interview.
right.
That
Great
was
to have
really
you.
Of
good.
course.
So that's it for this week of Odyssey, where a new era begins, and we'll be back again very soon. Thanks for tuning in. And Mark,
Thank you.
learned a lot, and I can't wait to learn a lot more.
I'm
So,
loving it. Thank you.
Excellent.